Welcome to Just an Average Citizen, the podcast that helps to educate, inform, and empower you to make an impact in Abilene and the Big Country. Okay, my new mission is to be short and succinct and give you little bite-sized podcast nuggets that you can actually pay attention to, listen to, and then apply it in your real world. Because who has time to listen to a lot of information and then it go in one ear and out the other, because we just don't have time to apply it. So I'm so glad you decided to join me today. I'm hoping to really get the word out and let people know that this podcast is available, because I think it's important that we start having conversations about what we as citizens can do. You know, I find myself introducing when I tell people my name, I just start blurting out that I'm just an average citizen, because sometimes I just want to feel like I'm making a difference. And being average sometimes doesn't feel like that. But what I know is that it's average people who do bring about change and make a difference. And it doesn't take a lot of us, but it just takes enough of us to be awake and aware of what's going on. So I hope you'll find something helpful to take away in this podcast that I'm doing for you right now. So what I wanted to do was give you just a little taste of why it's important to understand what goes on when it comes to a city budget. A couple of weeks ago, it's almost been a month ago now, the city council decided to vote on approving almost $1 million dog park. And you know what's interesting is that it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to foot the bill for everything in our city. I don't know where this came in, but it seems like the city is the one who is supposed to take care of the people and do all the things. But actually, the number one need the city has to take care of is doing public safety and providing public safety. And that's why it was took me aback when at that same meeting, we were told that if we didn't take care of some of these things that we're going to discuss here, that we were going to first have to start cutting our public safety. And that makes no sense, because there is a lot more room to work with than scaring us into thinking that if we don't do what is said or what is presented, we're all going to be, in peril or something like that. So let me just start off. I've learned this over the last year as I've dug deep into this to figure out how this goes. I actually started around July of last year, really figuring out my bearings. And what I found is there's budget stuff going all around. And so I showed up to the workshop and was one of two citizens there that had no reason to be there, except we were just curious and we wanted to know what was going on, and sat through it a little overwhelmed, like there was a fire hydrant of water coming at me. It was just overwhelming. But then I learned there is a rhythm and a reason to how things go. And if you can learn, you can start to pay attention in just little nuggets, and you don't have to go all in like I did. So hopefully you'll find some tidbits helpful. Let's look here at the budget process. So basically the city council starts with a planning workshop. It says here in February, but it actually didn't happen until March this year. And so it can vary a little bit, but then they develop priorities. They get a budget team, review policies and procedures. So all the people within the city are working hard to get their budgets in place so they can figure out what projections of cost there are. Then they develop budgets. Then this is all through May. So there's quite a few things that happen in May. And then in June, they do the proposed budget developed, and it's presented. And I just checked not too long ago, so this is where I found the proposed budget that we can look at. Then they bring it to the city council and citizens in July, and that's where we have a small window to be able to bring some concerns to them at the very beginning of the workshop, and that's pretty much the only time they've allowed public comment. Although I don't know, I didn't have the boldness to raise my hand and ask questions. They might allow more conversation there, because when I started to ask conversations in March at the workshop, the mayor was so kind to come over and tell me that it was really more for them to be able to discuss things, and that we would have an opportunity to have input in July. So I'll test that out and see what we could find out about being able to actually have input in the process. And then they adopt the budget, and then it's implemented in October. So that's just a simple process of how overall it goes. And you can start looking into it. I think one of the things that has challenged me most is that it is supposed to be something I can look at and get a basic understanding. But I hope you see that it's not so simple as we would hope it would be. So this is actually from the full budget that comes out in October. I'm trying to remember, maybe it was December. I can't remember when this actually full budget comes out where you can look at it. And I like to print a hard copy so that I can look at it and turn pages and make notes and mark with my little sticky notes and be the nerd that I am. proudly. So here is this year's proposed budget. And look, they have the train on there. Isn't that cute? And I have to say, the flowers look amazing at City Hall. The maintenance crew is doing an amazing job there, and it just really softens some of the edges of the actual City Hall. So, okay, so what I wanted to tell you is there are some key things that you need to start paying attention to. I've learned these words come up over and over, and we have to know what they mean, not what we think they mean. We have to have new definition. We have to understand the definition of what words are so that we can understand what we're really talking about. One of my favorite words that I hear a lot is, let me see, I wrote it down in my notes, is that's the end of life. And man, when you hear something's at the end of life, you think, wow, that's really scary. We've got to take care of it. So it compels you to follow the path that's been laid before you so that you do what they are hoping you will do, which is agree to spend the money that they have set out. Well, interestingly enough, that's not really always ideal, because I find that as I drive my car, there is yearly, monthly, sometimes maintenance that has to happen on my car that if I don't take care of or start setting aside money to buy a new car, then when my car dies, I actually have to go into debt to buy a car, which, in a lot of cases doesn't make a lot of sense because we just know the number crunching. It's just always better to pay for it up front than on the backside. But the city seems to think that that's kind of how it goes, is we just kind of go along, and then when things don't work anymore, we just take out a loan and fix it. So there are two types of loans. There's more than that, but the basic loans we need to know about is general obligation loans, which is actually something they bring to the ballot like we did last November and voted on. Anytime you hear about a bond or anytime you hear about an improvement that the city's going to do, it's 99% of the time going to be a tax, which means you're going to pay for it. And I think that's what's so concerning for me as last November is that it wasn't that people knew what was going on. They're like, yeah, we want to fix up the zoo. Let's take care of it. Not realizing that they're going to be the ones paying for it because we pay for it through property taxes, and that's where they collect their revenue to function as a city. I think that's about a third of the actual city budget is property taxes. Then we have sales taxes and is another third. And then we have some other taxes that go in, but mostly property taxes and sales taxes are the majority of how the city earns its money. So we had the general bond election. We had three options to take care of, to choose from. We could improve the rec centers for $28 million, improve the zoo, which was a 4-phased project. And this was partial improvement to the zoo for the first phase. I think that was the contribution the city was making for the first phase. And then we also had a walking trail or some kind of improvement out at Kirby Creek. The citizens decided not to fund the Kirby Creek one, but they were all for the zoo one and the rec centers. So we decided to pay out of our property tax. We increased our taxes to pay the city so they could cover the money that they didn't have to pay for the rec centers. So the problem with that is that rec centers are kind of like cars. They don't last forever. And if you don't set aside money, then you're going to find yourself in a position where they are at the end of life and you have no way to pay for them. So I find it very disingenuous for someone to manipulate the circumstances to say that we're just at a really bad, we're going to tear it down if we don't fix it. That kind of pressure, that kind of manipulation to me doesn't feel very honoring. And it doesn't feel very honest because the city has known for years that this was going to be something that needed to be done. And now they're in a bind and they need our help. And we'll look at that a little bit more as we go along. But I think there's more to that story that we need to pay attention to at the rec center. So let's go back. We were talking about general obligation bonds. So those are ones that we as citizens vote on. The other type is called certificate of obligation bonds. And those are ones that we don't vote on. And so what was interesting a couple meetings ago, the mayor mentioned that, the city doesn't have a Discover card. They just get to, they have to do things a different way because they don't have a credit card. And, it was interesting to me because certificate of obligations are exactly that, a credit card. When you don't have the funds, you just write a certificate of obligation. Now, the only recourse we as citizens have right now is if we get 10% of the registered voters to sign a petition within, I think, 30 days, then we can say, nope, you got to send that to election and we have to vote on it. But I don't know if you've paid attention. There's not a lot of people who are active enough that really understand what's going on, that they would be willing to help us get that many signatures to stop a certificate of obligation. So basically right now they can write a a way to pay for things that we actually have to cover without having a say. And I think it's interesting when they're like, oh, it only raises your taxes a small amount. But the problem is everything is going up. Everything is costing more money. Inflation is out of control. We're paying so much more at the grocery store. Sales tax are down because we don't have the income to spend. And that's part of the reason why the city's in the bad place they're in. And I'm running out of time, so I've got to move forward. So those are the two type of bonds that actually increase taxes. There's no type of bond except for a revenue bond, which is what the hotel was built with. And so they took out a loan for the hotel, believing that the taxes they collect from a portion of the hotel occupancy tax will cover the payment of that loan till we pay it back. And so that's an interesting conversation we'll have to talk more about. Okay, so let's look at a couple of things. I wanted to point out to you, just so you can look through here. Here we are. Let's look at this. So this budget is something you can look at and read at. I do like, and I would encourage you to read starting on page 7. There's the letter from the city manager, and he talks about the economic outlook. He gives us some information that he's been giving along the way. He tells about some changes we're going to have to make because we need to make some cuts because taxes are going flat and it's not producing the income we need. And so one of the things I really wanted to point out that I thought was interesting, so let's come here. I'm going to type in this page number to save us some time. All right, so this is the Downtown Hotel Operating Fund. So the city budget is operated with different funds. We have the general fund, and then that's broken up to smaller funds, and then we have like the water and sewer fund, and so those two shall not meet. So we really don't spend money in water and sewer on general fund, and then even within the general fund, if we get money for the street maintenance fees, those only go for the street maintenance fund. It doesn't go to things like capital improvement projects. And so then we have things like the minor improvement project fund, which is only spent on capital projects. It can't go towards the streets. And it's very confusing and it's hard for us to track if you don't know what you're talking about. So I just want to look at this budget summary. So what's interesting here is we have the actual 2023 budget, or 2022-2023 budget. We have what was approved, the 2023-2024, and then we have the revised. So what happens is along the year, they're like, we're going to have to spend more money here. Like I noticed that there were several vehicles they had to purchase for the city that were way over budget, and they had to ask approval to make sure they could spend that money because it wasn't budgeted or things like that. I don't know if that was a good example, but they've revised it along the way. Okay. And then we have what's called the proposed budget for the 2024-2025 year. So we're heading into that in October. This is what they're going to be talking about in July at their workshop, and they're going to pass in August, and then they'll actually implement in October. This is the end of the year stuff that we're dealing with right now. So our hotel hasn't been around for very long, so you can see that we actually have some state tax rebates that started this last year. We have some miscellaneous revenue, which I think is some income earned on interest earned on some investments possibly, and then these transfers in. What transfers in? I'm not real sure, except that I did happen to notice this $1.282 million number. And because I was paying attention, I looked and I saw that, look, right here, $1.282 million from the hotel occupancy tax fund. So sometimes you get lucky and you see there's the transfer out. So it transferred that money out into the Downtown Hotel Operating Fund. All right, so that's one of my big issues with this is how hard would it be to say transfers into this fund? It wouldn't be hard. If there was transparency, that would be written in because that's helpful for us to know. But it seems like, not in this case particularly, but in any case, there's not a lot of transparency so we can track stuff and look and see what's going on. So we look here and we have our total revenues. For last year, our total revenues were $3.2 million, and this year it is $1.9 million. And then we have expenditures. So we have charges and services, which started this past year of $1.9 million. And then we have our proposed for this upcoming year of $2.6 million. I'm kind of rounding up. And then we have some transfers out, and I'm not exactly sure what those are because I haven't seen that number. And again, it's kind of like solving a mystery, but it's really fun when you do it because I asked a councilman last year to help me figure this out and he didn't have anything to offer me, but I found it. I feel like there was a little divine intervention there to show me where I was looking because I wasn't looking in the right places. And when it happened, it was really like, oh, I felt like the angels were singing, and I'm probably taking this a little too seriously or not taking it seriously enough. I don't know, one of the two. So our total expenditures for last year were almost $2.4 million. And then this year it's proposed to be about $3 million. I think it's a little small, so I'm not sure if I can see that. But my point is we have this understanding that revenues and expenditures, this is what we bring in, this is what it costs. Well, if you look over here, if it's over, that means you have enough money. It is without parentheses. But if it's under, meaning you don't have enough money, it is with parentheses. Over expenditures or under expenditures. So here we really weren't doing much. Last year, the year we're finishing up, it looks like we have about, is that $630,000? And then, look here, $1.2 million. So here's where I'm like, I might ask some questions. Why are we under $1.2 million? I do think there's an explanation. It hasn't picked up and business isn't going as well as they thought it would be, but they're hoping it will pick up. But still, $1.2 million is a lot of money to have to figure out what you're going to do with in a year where sales tax are flat. And so that leaves us, if you notice, which I think is real interesting, we're exactly over what our fund budget balance will end at September 30th. That's cutting it a little close. Or there's more to the story. I'm not sure which. My husband and I were talking about this, and I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, well, that indicates this or that or this. And I'm like, So at the end of 24-25, we will have absolutely no money in our operating fund. And that's one of the things that our city manager, Robert Hanna, said, that they were not going to be contributing back into the general funds, that they were going to be letting those fund balances go down, because we do have a substantial fund balance in each one. But I'm afraid, based on what's been going on, it's not going to work out so well. So for example, let's come back up here to the hotel occupancy tax fund. You can see here, we're not going to be expecting to get as many taxes in hotel occupancies as we were expecting. So it looks like we're going to be under budget, a little less than $800,000. And so those are things that we have to pay attention. How this all works out, I'm not really sure, because again, this is a very complicated process. And while we want to know all the things, we just can't. But finding a track forward to figure out how to understand these things. Why does this matter? Because we need to understand that there are things going on that we have to start paying attention. And this is why this matters. So I like this Veteran Cemetery Fund on 54 because it's a brand new program. The state contracted us to help. We can see exactly where it is. There's no budget. There's no fund balance. There's nothing we can get. It's kind of like a blank slate, so we can figure out what's going on. The other thing I wanted to show on, I'll type this in real quick, is this new, everybody's excited about the new street improvements going down on Cypress Street, because we're just so excited to get our downtown up and going. So here's an interesting thing that, we can see the property taxes that are coming in, the investment income, our total revenues proposed is $1.18 million. And you can see all the different opportunities. You have the facade improvement grant program. There's a demolition program that comes from this. There's the Cypress Street project. I believe we approved for the planing of it, the architecture, all that stuff, the design. I think that's what that's called. Then we have, we're giving $500,000 to the Heritage Square Library project proposed in 2024, 2025. And then here is, I believe this is our debt service, because a few years ago, the TERS board approved for the city to take out a certificate of obligation to utilize revenue in the TERS. So the taxes are frozen in a TERS, and then any money they collect over that frozen amount gets to go into revenue to improve the space. And so the board said, hey, you can use some of that revenue to pay for improving the street. So that's where we get that big CO. I think it's $7.5 million. And, anyway, so that's it. Okay, the one thing I did want to show you, let me see if I can find it real quick so we can move on, because you're like, okay, my eyes are going a little cross. All right, let me see here. This is it, the Minor Improvement Project Fund. Now, I have to say this is pretty impressive. I don't recall this being in last year's budget this extensive, and I think it's because the sheer amount of projects. So what I noticed is another buzzword. So does anybody remember the first buzzwords that we were talking about? That's right. End of life. That's the first one. I forgot it. The second one, I want you to understand this buzzword called proceeds. Proceeds typically mean when you borrow money the money you take out are your proceeds. I call that a loan. I call that debt. I call that my credit, whatever you want to call it, but I don't call it proceeds. I never think of a loan as something that's beneficial to me, but proceeds are what the term is used. So you'll find in his letter, Robert Hanna talks about the proceeds. That's just the money we get from taking out a loan, our City Discover card, so to say. Okay, so what I want to show you, I can't tell you all the stuff because you'll not want to listen to me ever again. But you can look on here on page 71, starting page 71, they have the Minor Improvement Project Fund. And what that is they get 5% off of the general fund, and they put it towards capital projects. Capital projects are like finite projects that you could start, and in it, like putting in a new street light, or that's not a capital project, that's a street. For example, like the flat fields. Okay, the new flat fields at the George Jones Center, or the Abilene Youth Sports Authority location. So what's interesting is you can see here we spent $5 million last year on the animal shelter. We have lots of change orders on the downtown area, which we'll talk about private-public partnerships. I think I talked about that a little bit last time. How is it that we're paying so much money for a public-private partnership, and it's due to the way we write our contract? We've spent another $900,000, so that was on top of, I guess, the $500 we're putting here. There's more coming that way. And then, let's see here. Okay, we're going to come down here. I wanted to show you, it's on page actually 73. Look here. Oh, well, yeah, I won't go there. Okay, trying to stay on task here. So for example, let's see here. The Nelson Park Flat Fields. It was approved for $6 million. Now, this is an interesting story, and I would love if anyone would like to comment and tell me how to figure out this mystery. We approved for $6 million, but it only says $5 million. But I was present when we had this meeting in December, and it wasn't $5 million, it was $10 million. We spent $10 million on the Nelson Park Flat Fields. Now, why is it only here? Let me answer this. I do know this is because they were able to find magically $5 million in our budget to use for sewer lines and other things. They were able to play around and figure out how to make $5 million appear out of nowhere. So we spent $10 million. But the problem is that's not the whole story. And transparency would say that, see other funding. Where's that coming from? It's not in here. And so looky here. We spent $21 million on capital project expenditures. But if you come back up here, we actually only had $11 million. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I'm hoping you're sticking with me, is because we're in a conundrum right now. There are $7 million of capital project. There's $7 million of capital projects that we as a city said, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to improve the microwave radio communication systems. We're going to partner with the state or the federal. I can't remember. I think it's a state to have a capacity for these big planes to come in and help fight fires when they're happening. So we agreed to that. We agreed to partner with Abilene Heritage Square to have our city library move over there on a lease kind of program like the mall. We also agreed to pay for pickleball courts. Okay, so these are things we agreed to in our budget, and now we're out of money. But it seems like we funded a whole heck of a lot of stuff. We funded $21 million, and I'm trying to remember even if that's in there. The pickleball courts are in there, so they're trying to cut out of the $21 million, they're trying to cut out some of this money, $7 million. But 11 and 21 still don't add up. So look here, we're at a $10 million deficit in our expenditures for the Minor Improvement Project Fund. So now if I could sit down and have a conversation and say, okay, tell me what's going on. Why are we at $10 million over? It's not like we kind of goofed. We're expecting more money, or where did this money go? And I'm asking you, or I'm telling you just face to face, like, hey, this is how I try and figure out questions. So this is a question I'm going to see what I can do to get to the bottom of it. But here, if you look next year or in this upcoming year, we've only proposed to do $2 million. So the problem I have is, in my world, if I can't go on vacation because I don't have enough cash, I don't take out a loan. I just don't go on vacation. So why is it when the city had said, hey, we're going to pay for these pickleball courts for $1.3 million. Oh, but now they're going to be $2.1 million. Why don't we just say, hey, we can't do it this year? Why don't we cut that out instead of taking out a loan to fund something that we haven't done? On top of the $1 million we agreed to take care of a dog park. Now, a friend of mine sent some pictures from another dog park that was completely privately funded by people, and you paid to use the park and all these things. It seems like we have a bad habit on taking on projects that we as a city should not do. And now we're in a bad spot and we're having to cut a lot of money, and it's not really feeling great, and it feels like it's chaotic, but actually it's just due to us not paying attention and making plans for the future. I don't know if anyone else in this world didn't see inflation coming, but why are we spending all this money on zoo improvements, on all these things? And again, they didn't spend the money. It's our money coming out of, it's all our money, all the taxes. It all comes from us. There is some grants coming from state and federal funding, but it really comes out of our pockets. And it's hard when people say we're at the end of life, but we didn't make a plan for it. So that's why I want you to understand we've got to start paying attention, because I think there's enough history with how many people who've been on the council, and our city manager has been here long enough that we can start to see patterns. And we have to start holding some people accountable, because there are so many of them on there that have been a part of the problem. Instead of bringing solutions, they're just continuing to kick the can down the curb, or kick the can down the road is the right way to say it. And I don't think that, we have to be ugly about it, but we have to start having hard conversations. How do we go? To my understanding of how budget works, this is $10 million. And, when I brought this up at the city council meeting, it was like, well, we've got to cut somewhere. No, we just don't spend money. And the Abilene Heritage Square, that's another thing. We knew, the library is from the 60s. It's not like it's a shocker that our library is falling apart. So why, when we had so much more money in the last couple of years, did we not start setting aside money for a future library? That's not rocket science. That's just called good financial choices. But we're not seeming to make that. And I haven't figured out why we're not making that, but there's a lot of confusion going on. I have a list of other things that I could share with you. I'll go into those later, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how to start looking and seeing what's going on. And open up you open up this budget. Let me show you where it is real quick. You come to the home page. Oh, let me come here to the home page. It's real easy to find. You come down here to financial transparency. Oh, the button disappeared. You come to financial transparency, and my internet's acting up, and it'll open you up to the annual budget. You can see financial reports, the debt, but here's the annual budget, and you can see all the years. I don't want you to go through all the years. I just want you to open up the proposed budget and look on page 73, starting at 71, and look and see all the different capital projects we've accomplished this year. We have accomplished 3 pages worth, and it shows in our cost. So I hope that helps you out. Remember, end of life doesn't mean we have to do it. It just is a good way to make you think, oh my gosh, if we don't take care of it, then it's all going to fall apart. No, we knew it was coming. That's just a way to get you distracted. And then also proceeds. Proceeds are just the money that you agree to increase your taxes so they could spend it on things that they don't have to spend it on. And why the microwave radios are part of that project, it seems like that's kind of a basic thing that you need to know ahead of time. It wasn't like it was a shocker that we were going to need to update our radio communication. And so these are things that just make me want to know more information. So I hope that gives you a little start. I hope you are interested and starting to wonder what's going on so that you will have conversations, because it's not meant for us just to go, okay, whatever. We really should be aware, and we can start to communicate with our city council and tell them, hey, we're not happy about this $1 million. You need to bring it back to the table if possible and take it off the table, because a friend of mine was so good. He was like, why don't we just build a bridge? It's already got stuff at the park there. We don't need to spend as much money. And then we have the park if we're going to have to do a park. But I do believe that the person who mentioned that a dog park was a quality of life issue has some quality of life issue orders out of order, if that makes sense. So we've got to work on this, and we need you to do it. So thanks for listening. It would really help me if you could subscribe and share this podcast. And if you're on Facebook, if you could like and follow my page, then I can start to go live. I didn't realize I had to jump through all these hoops to get to go live, but I would really like to start doing some live programming opportunities when I'm around at different meetings and stuff like that. And so if you could do that, that would be awesome. And so until next time, make sure you're paying attention so that you can be educated, informed, and empowered to make an impact in Abilene in the big country.